Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain and welcome back. Now today I kind of want to talk about science literacy and its importance because it's one of these things that a lot of people who aren't interested in science, in school and stuff like that, they just move past it. You know, the information hits their brain, they pass their standardized tests if they have standardized tests in those areas, and then they move on, and because it's something that they weren't interested in, it's kind of in one ear out the other, you know? And that presents a bit of a problem, in my eyes anyway, because, you know, you don't need to be able to do all the maths around science. You don't need to be able to do all of the number crunching and understand all of the kind of vast or like really difficult terminology to get into when it's some of the terms are so nebulous because it's theoretical physics or something like that. But one of the things that's been coming up a lot lately is that because it's been so uncomfortably melty here in the UK at the moment, where I went out swimming with Hannah when I was away for a week at an open air pool. And I'm not a big swimmer. You know, it's never been one of those things that I've been particularly passionate about to one extent or another. But you know, it was a nice day out. But I'm one of these people who is incredibly pale-skinned and goes from white to pink, and there is nowhere in between until the sun has gone away and 6 weeks have passed, and then I might be a little bit brown, and then I will go back to pale, white as can be, and then that will be it. The only reason that now I seem to have more colour to my face is that to prevent the sun from blinding me, there are my curtains across, and I've got my lamp here in the background lighting me up so that I can record properly. But it is incredibly warm, far too warm for me, and I am slowly dying. Or I should say maybe slowly dying faster than I would usually be slowly dying. And it's so uncomfortably warm. And so as a result, rather unsurprisingly, one of the discussion topics that's been coming up a fair amount is climate change and the peaks and spikes in global temperature changes. And, you know, the various reasons for it. Deforestation, huge amounts of various kind of fossil fuels being burned worldwide, the carbon footprint and all that kind of thing. And as a result, though, it's one of those things where you get these people who aren't as scientifically literate. Either older people or people who just didn't pay attention in school, weren't interested in science even for the concepts, you know, and then the topics become very weird. You know, things that seem very simple become very strange. For instance, there was a conversation that I was having only the other day in regards to climate change, and we were talking about, yeah, well, one of the biggest problems is that we're pumping out all of this extra all these extra carbon emissions into the atmosphere, the whole greenhouse effect thing, damaging the ozone layer, and all that stuff that was heard an awful lot more about in the 90s before it got more condensed into the climate change theories. You know, we were talking about all of that, and this one individual went, yeah, but we've potentially got more kind of trees now than we had like a couple of hundred years ago when they first started kind of wiping out huge amounts of forest land for farming and such. It's like, yeah, but you realise we're part of a global ecosystem, right? A global weather system. It doesn't matter if necessarily one country has, you know, doesn't produce as much in the way of a carbon footprint and has more trees because its neighbours might not. You realise that weather patterns and kind of the pollution that we cause and the oxygen that the trees output for us, you realise that doesn't just stop at kind of international waters or country boundaries, right? And there are people that just don't seem to understand this. You know, there are people that don't seem to understand why it suddenly got so warm, or those that make excuses for climate change when it's really, if you've got some level of understanding of it, it's really hard to make excuses for it because of all of the data that's accrued year on year on a worldwide basis on weather patterns, on temperatures, and the changes over time since records began and all that kind of thing. There was a really cool graphic that was kind of mesmerizing that went out the other day, where it was the temperature peaks and anomalies over the last 116 years, from 1900 to 2016, and it gets progressively warmer over time from like about the mid 1970s until the modern day. It's not, you're not getting those lows anymore. You're just getting the continual growth of or the increase in temperature, and the reasons for that are numerous. But then you look at the kind of just people, the people who have been through education, the people who are maybe a tad older, and certain facts have evolved or changed, and you're looking at that kind of thing, and you're having the President of the United States, who should have access, considering his country's capacity and wealth, he should have access to so much more information than these people. And yet even he is stepping away. Even he is stepping away from the scientific community and saying that these things aren't they're not that important. They're not real. They're conspiracies and all that kind of shit. And it's like, throughout my lifetime alone, the last 30 years, it's been getting progressively warmer and warmer and less comfortable for people like me who do not do well in the heat. And it's like the difference year on year has been not just noticeable, it's been painful. Like, you don't need to go far to realise the chaos that is being caused on a climate level. And yet, because people step away from science literacy and from even just taking on some of that extra information, which, by the way, could also make their lives easier in many instances, because science is the thing that is behind the internet, the computers that we use, the phones that we have, the chemicals that we use to clean things with, clean ourselves with, the way that we maintain our bodies, the things that go into our food, the way that we interact with our atmosphere, our environment and atmosphere. All of those things, people just shut themselves off from. And so this is why I have an awful lot of respect for channels like, say, Because Science from the Nerdist lot, who will take a look at sciences and scientific concepts and principles in an interesting way, and could there, and why I have a great appreciation for scientists like Professor Brian Cox for bringing science to the fore, and same with Neil deGrasse Tyson and other scientists like that who bring science to people and try and help them take it on board to make their lives easier, to understand the importance of the things that are going on and how they can affect it. And so I kind of just wanted to make this video to emphasize the importance of scientific literacy in the first place, but also just to say, if you've never been someone who's been into science, maybe just have a read of a couple of journals or something. Go and watch some videos on Because Science, or go and watch some videos from Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye or whoever. There's an awful lot of interesting stuff out there. And I'll admit, I was good at science in school. It was before I moved into management and coaching and everything else. I wanted to go into science. When I was doing my, when I was in sixth form in college, and I was doing my A levels, I was doing all sciences. I was doing biology, chemistry, physics, and psychology. And it was a case of I wanted to take those further. My biggest issue, and one of the reasons why I didn't do as well, is that at the time my math skills were poor, or at the very least subpar for what was required. Because I don't really care for the maths. The math stuff was difficult for me because it was always under pressure, because it was always a timed exam or something like that. Firstly, I've got a bit of a verbal dependency when it comes to my thought processes, and so as a result I don't do well in exams anyway. But then on top of that, it was a case of, you give me the concepts, then sure, I'll be able to remember them, I'll be able to explain them, I'll be able to use them. My teachers were, in many instances, were like, you can sit down and tell us everything, why can't you put it down on paper? And part of the reason was that when it came to the maths side of things, if when is a scientist in a lab ever going to need to recall the formulae straight off the top of their head? If they don't know it, they've got books, they've got the internet, they can look up everything else that they need and apply it. So when you sit me in a silent room where I just have to recall as much as I possibly can to get everything on paper, then I struggled. And my math skills didn't start properly improving until I had something real world to apply it to, rather than weird abstract problems, which was when I was working with money and when I was working with things like VAT and bits and pieces for end of month reporting and all that kind of thing. It took me up until that point where I was dealing with an awful lot of cash and doing an awful lot of other stuff in managerial roles before I could apply the math skills that previously I just hadn't really had any way of envisioning and putting together in a way that was useful. And so, yeah, I can appreciate all those people who go, oh, maths and science, they're hard. I was one of those people that would be right there with you. I fucking hated maths, but as a subject in school. But then you got to think about those things as tools. Science and the various areas of science are ways of understanding the world around us, and they enable us to develop tools to then interact with it. Maths as a thing is again basically the same thing, a way of understanding stuff for us, a tool for us to use to gain greater understanding and to plan more effectively and everything else, to quantify. And as a result, you might not be into the maths. Fair enough. And there is a lot of it in science. But the concepts are, in many ways, the things that are far more important to your average person. Knowing that reducing your carbon footprint you're doing your little bit to maybe preventing the world from continuing to get hotter and hotter and more miserable for people like me. Or in terms of, the situations around, how you manage your home, the chemicals that you have, that you use, the things that go into your food. It's all a case of understanding where they are. If you don't care, then fine. But having an understanding of what those things are in the first place should be prerequisite to then making that decision, rather than just brushing it off in the first place. So it's something that I kind of feel passionately about, but I'm not really in a position to join the ranks of science educators in full myself. I have my area of specialization that tends to be coaching, and the areas around coaching and life coaching and career coaching, corporate executive stuff, profiling. Those are my areas of expertise. And there is a lot of psychology in there, but also psychology isn't necessarily a thing that can help solve climate change, as it were. There's a small part of it, engaging people and all that kind of thing, but that's not going to make the overall changes that need to happen. But what I can say is that, give science a chance. There are an awful lot of people that when I start talking about stuff like this and how things apply, they just glaze over. And they glaze over seemingly purely because it's something that they don't want to engage with. Not because they couldn't, but because they're afraid to, or they've got preconceived notions. And that's a tough thing to crack. And the only person who can crack that is the person that's, you know, got that in them in the first place. So if you're one of those people that when you're talking about science or whatever else, you start to glaze over, one of those people even who goes, oh, I don't talk about politics. Well, guess what? Politics affects you. Go and become informed about it. Go and vote. You know, you gain that information first before you decide what you're going to do. And science literacy, I feel, is one of the most important. Even if it's just the concepts, even if you can't do the maths, even if you don't know all the formulae, fine. Understand the concepts. Yeah, understand the global warming doesn't, or climate change and weather patterns and things like that that cause it don't just stop at country lines, for instance. You know, and that's I'm sure that sounds to many of you like a really daft thing to say, but it seems to be the level of understanding that certain people have. You know, so, oh, China's terrible, but that won't affect us. Well, actually it will, because we're a globe, you know, enclosed environment, floating through space. We're all here, same place, same time. Can't really remove yourselves too far from those other people, even if you don't like them, even if you don't want to engage with them. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are there any other channels that you guys watch in regards to science literacy to keep you up to date? Like things like Game Theory, Film Theory, Because Science, Seeker, Sci-File, a whole load of others that there are online, especially on YouTube, you know, that are really good to watch and really interesting to just get that information from, especially when they all do the same thing. You know, they all do something on a recent scientific discovery or something like that, you know, and you can gain that extra little tidbits of information from all those different places just because one person will include it but one person won't, you know. But where do you find your information? Why, if you're one of those people that steps away from science and maths, finds them intimidating and stuff like that, what is it about it that you find intimidating? You know, how could it be made more approachable, you know, for you? But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys, and otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the video later. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video later. Take care.